Welcome back to Iterating Always. I am your host, Niraj Kamra, and the last episode, continuing on with our project, the SF Org Pulse engine, we stopped juggling loose variables and started holding people as full records, as how we do in real life. Just to show here, we have everything here as a loose variable, and these are not actually tied together. And then we set up the dictionaries, and within that user dictionary is all the data from Maria, and we did the exact same thing with David. Now we have this user data collected in a list with Maria and David, and those are our first two employees, and that could be the start of a workforce. But holding data is all that it did. We have two records or 10,000. It just sits there. We couldn't evaluate anybody, couldn't make a call, couldn't route. Today, we're going to make it act. We will scale the list, make a decision about every person, and sort them. And this right here, the isActive flag that I planted back in episode 1, will actually go to work. But I'll tell you the part that was quietly dreading. It's not the dictionaries. Those turned out to be like S object records in Salesforce. And I've built thousands of those. It's no issue. Loops and conditionals, though, that's the stuff that looks like pure programming. Terminal heavy, real developer type stuff. So, in an effort to make this a bit more visually appealing and to make it easier to explain what's going on, I am going to do this episode backwards. Every other episode, I wrote the Python first and showed you the Salesforce mirror. Today, we will flip it. We are going to start in Salesforce on my turf. I've already set up the exact routing flow we need using those boxes and arrows the way I've done for years. Then we'll look at Python and find out what it's the exact same moves that we did in the flow. All right, so the first thing I want to show you guys is that when I was creating staged user, we created the first few fields, which basically mirrored what was in Python. And I added two more before we started this episode: staged first name and staged last name. And the reason why I did that is so the object in Salesforce lines up with the dictionary in Python. And one honest quirk that I want to point out while we're looking at the screen, see this field? Stage user employee ID. I labeled it as stage user employee ID, but Salesforce makes every custom object carry one required identifier, and it locks that API name to name. So I can relabel this. I can change this from stage user employee ID to anything I want. And that's the way it'll look visually within Salesforce when people are looking at data. But if we wanted to refer to this field or find specific records or specific objects within Salesforce using different tools like flow automations, and then we would have to use the field name of name. Now, in Python, the ID was just anything I chose to type and make. I literally had that freedom to do so. But in Salesforce, it's basically gives you a solid opinion that it will never back away from. And it's pretty stubborn that way. So you got to keep it there. Okay, so I've built the flow. I'm going to show it up right now. And I'll walk through what it does. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to look at in this flow is that we are going to sort through all the users that are considered active or inactive, hence the name, active and inactive staged users and records. Before I even get to that, let me talk about this because it might not upset, but it might cause a little bit of friction with people that are actually Salesforce admins that know how to use Flow. Because if you're an admin watching, you're already, maybe, just maybe, yelling at your screen. There's an easier way to do this flow, but the reason why I did it the way I did it is to illustrate how this would look in Python and to make sense of it logically. So for instance, I could have just used 2 get elements to achieve the same thing I'm doing right now, and I wouldn't even need all this extra stuff. But just to show you how it works in Python, I made it go through a loop and loop through each of the stage records that we established here, and then check if it's active or inactive. And if it's active, collect it into one record collection. And if it's inactive, put it into another record collection. And then from there, we would basically display the results. Now, I could have easily just done this with another one of these get elements, because right now we are just looking for all of the stage user records, all of them, despite it being active or inactive. I could have easily just put a filter here and added in basically if it needs, like, for instance, I could just show you quickly so you understand what I mean. I could have put equals true. And then that would look for all the staged user records with an is active value of true. And I could have did the exact same thing with the second, it was inactive. I could have just did this last step here. So just putting that out, and want to make sure that I know what you're already thinking. And like I said, I'm doing this on purpose because that's the shape that matches what's in Python and what we're about to write. I want the logic out in the open where you can see it and not buried in a filter. The flow launches and we get all the stage user records. And that's every user that we've put into Salesforce. And then from there, we are going to sort and loop through each of those records. So when we go through the loop, the first thing we do is we're going to check if it has an active flag, which is active equals true, remember the Boolean, or inactive, which is everything else. So that's the way that we would do it. You don't have to be explicit about the inactive because we only have 2 options here, true or false. We see 2 branches, active, inactive. And so we have active here, and we're adding it to a variable called active count. And when it sees that there is an active record looping through the list, then it'll add to the variable active count, and we add a value of 1. We're just counting at this point. Active count and inactive count, all they do is hold a number. So we go through this list, and then with how many stage user records that we have, and then what it'll do is that I will then create a record showing the active count. That was the variable that we have, and the other variable have, and populate it with the value that was there, which is just a number. And then we will show when the date was run for that record. So people would know in the system if that's the most up-to-date value of active versus inactive users. And so what I'll do is that quickly, I'll show you the data here. We can see here that we have employee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's got some of the same people that we know already and a lot more. We got Ravi Patel and basically 10 employees. Great. That's in the system right now. That flow, when it runs, it's going to go through all of this and determine if it's active or inactive, which you can see here. We have 7 active and 3 inactive. Now, this is easy to do when you only have 10 records, but if you have 1,000, there's no way to just read through that. That's a waste of time for someone. So what we're going to do here is that we are going to test and make sure that this works. I don't need to save, so let's just reload this. So I'm going to debug this now, and let's run it. So we can see here, it shows you everything that's happening in the logic. So you can see here, iteration 0 of the get all staged user records, iteration 0, iteration 1, iteration 2, and it keeps on going through this whole process over and over again. And it's a great way to see how the flow automation is thinking. You get a visual, you get that visual look, and that's what I love about Salesforce. And then we get down to the last one, 9, and then we create the record. So this flow created a record showing the data. And if we look in our system, I can now pull this up. And I created a new custom object called org health snapshots just to contain this data. So don't fret if you don't understand why it's here. I created a custom object in setup, and let's look at all the regular ones. So this is the record that I just created with the flow. And we can see we got 7 active count and 7 inactive count. Perfect. So what we stated out set to do actually worked the way we wanted it to do. And just to illustrate that again, I will show you how this works. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7's active and 3 inactive. Beautiful. So let me show you how this is going to work in VS Code, because we just formatted and highlighted with this record what the engine would do to show inactive versus active. So let's go to the other side. All right. Okay, and before I do anything, I just want to do some housekeeping. This file has been carrying last episode's scaffolding. We had loose variables, the type checks, the profile printout. Let's just get rid of that. So with Maria Singh, we already established her here in a dictionary. So we don't really actually need this anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of this. Also, these print statements, they don't serve any purpose in this engine. All they're doing is just adding extra work for this engine that doesn't need to do any of this. These print statements just basically show the data type of each of the variables that we just deleted. So if I were to run this right now, save it, it would result in an error because it wouldn't even know what to do with that code. So we get rid of that to remove that problem. And then also this profile printout, which is basically just a structured form of what we had before. And again, it could be gone as well. So this is our new starting point. The data type is auto number. And I gave it a prefix of employee. I set up the formatting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this in Python as well. So just to make things more even. Yeah. Well, let's go and do that. And I will do the same. Great. All right, so I will now add in more users, and I'll just walk through the first one, and I will skip through and not bore you with just typing for the next 20 minutes to get this done. What we're doing now is adding another entry into the list of staged users. We're adding another dictionary into staged users. So how we do that, we staged users. We want to append another dictionary. So in brackets, we want to append, and we open up for a dictionary entry. Okay, so I put together all of the current employees in the SF Org Plus engine that contains our company right now. It's slowly growing, but quickly. And let's face it, we had David and Maria before, and that was 2 users. That's not a company. That's a slow Tuesday for the at company.com. Now that I've added in 10 other names, we are up to 12. We got Priya, Tom, Aisha. Remember Ravi? Ravi's going to be a problem. And a handful more. We got some active, some not. David here is still half-time. So, but this is our workforce, and what's sleeping up to be a good team. So now we are going to route these guys. Next, let's start off by making 2 lists, because that's what we're doing here. We're making 2 lists. So we will call one active queue, and then we will call the other inactive queue. It's not good. So now that we have our two empty lists, which are empty, and we want to place our users, also known as our dictionaries, into either one of those lists, we have to first loop through the list. The first thing we want to loop on is staged users, because staged users is where all the data is held. So we got to look into that. So we're basically calling the index right now. And the way we establish that is through what we call a for loop. For user. User is just the iterator. It's the thing that keeps on going, looping around. So a user would be a thing that's looping around that circle, going through each record. So just kind of think of it that way. But I could have used anything. I could have used X. I could have used Y. I could have used any name here. I just use user because it makes it more simple to understand. And there we go. In. So we are looping user, or the iterator, in staged users, which is our dictionary. And I'm going to put a colon, and I will tell it what to do at this point. So now we're inside staged user. What are we doing? So we're looking at the first record, and if user, which would be the first entry into staged users, or second entry, third entry, depending on how many are in the whole thing. So the for loop will look through a whole list, everything in the list, unless you put certain conditions in that. But the way it's established now, it'll look through everything in the list, and no matter what. So what we're doing now is deciding, giving it an action to do, or an evaluation condition to put in. So if user I'm going to explain this right now. When we establish the for loop, user right here is equal to the iterator, and staged users is what we're looping through. Now, this may be a bit confusing for people that come from Salesforce, because what the idea here is that we are looking and to evaluate if one is true and one is false, because that's what the exactive variable or key value is. It's either true or it's false. In Salesforce, your immediate instinct is to yell at the screen and ask, how come in the first if conditional statement, there's no equal sign, there's no equals to true? How do we know Or how does Python know that if isActive is true or isActive is false if we don't establish that or explicitly state that? And here's why. In Salesforce, when you build a formula field or a flow decision element on a checkbox, you don't write isActive equals true. You just evaluate the checkbox field itself because a checkbox is a true or false state. Python works the exact same way. So an if statement doesn't look for the word true. It just evaluates whether the expression inside it is true or false. So since user is active already holds a Boolean of true or false from our dictionary, Python evaluates the flag directly. Adding an equals true is like writing an extra true in a formula. It's like it's doing the same evaluation twice. So Python takes the redundant typing away. If the key holds a Boolean, the if statement just reads the flag. So we don't have to establish that. And it's implicit that the first one it's looking for true. But we could technically add that in so you could understand what I'm talking about. But I could have easily just put here. And it would accomplish the same thing. But it's actually not necessary in this case. So what we're going to do now is we are going to run this. So let's go and Python. So let's just go ahead and run this. So we ignore the other stuff. Oh yeah, let's move that out too. We don't need that. There's nothing for us. Taking that out as well. So let's run that again. Okay, we can get rid of this too. All right. So we see here active 8, inactive 4, just how we had it here. We have 12 people, and it's exactly what happened when we did the exact same thing in Flow. Even though the Flow didn't have as many users, it still evaluated the same data and sorted the data into different groups and different buckets so we could see. One thing I want to point out too, now this is great, and we got this sorted out pretty quickly. But in a real life business setting, we would still have problems with this data. And I'll tell you why. Even though it evaluated all the records in place and all the dictionaries, it didn't check to see if all the data was complete. And that's something that we need to keep in practice and is best practices. So right now with Ravi, we see here his email is blank. Now, this is incomplete data. And though he is still active, we don't have the requisite data to perform further functions. And we need to be on top of this. But down the road, when we have 1,000, we need to ensure that all our users have all the required information for us to run our company. It's very important. And Ravi here, his email is empty. And what we programmed into Python, the loop didn't care. Like the loop that I put in, the automation didn't care that Ravi had an empty email because it wasn't asked to do that. It did exactly what I told it to do. Is check the isActive flag and sort it. It never asked if the record was any good in the first place. And that's a problem. In a real organization, that's the record that breaks something 3 steps downstream, and you lose an afternoon trying to find out why this happened. So before we route anyone, we should check the batch first before we execute. And that's a different kind of loop. And it's kind of loop within a loop. And we are going to implement that right now. So before we do anything else, now that we've established that Ravi's email is empty, we got to put in a check to make sure that the data we have in the system is correct. We have this for loop and it organized everything that we wanted to. Perfect. So we already know that works. So what we're going to do though is we're going to add another block of text here. So I'll just type it up and then I'll explain how it works. So that was a lot of code, and let's hope I didn't mess up any of the syntax. But what I'm showing you here is a while loop. And while the for loop walks through the whole list, start to finish, no matter what, it always does that. A while loop will hold or run as long as the condition holds. We are initiating the while loop while the value of I is less than the length of staged users. So we have in our data set right now, we have 10 dictionaries or 10 users, and for the sake of the dictionary, within staged users. And we initialize that I equals 0. So right now, what we're saying is that while I is equal to 0, and then length of staged users is going to be 10. So right now, that's true because we have 0 is equal to 0 and 9. So if that's true, we look at the first thing and we see here the iterator or while user is equal to the first value in staged user. Staged users at 0 would to this value, which would be the employee of Priya Nair. So right now, that's pointing at 0. It's looking right at that. And we're looking through each one of the text values. So now we see if the user, which is established in this first one, is Priya Nair, we see that if there isn't any value in first name, we will then print out and say, hey, this record of 0 is missing the first name. So that gives us that stop. Hey, before we do anything else, I'm alerting you that there is no first name. And so if that passes, that we do have a first name, we go to the next one. And it's called an else if we don't have a last name, print this message. In this case situation, we have Nair. So it will go and it'll continue on because it did not meet that condition. And the last thing is email. So does Priya Nair have an email? I'm like, yeah, it does. priya.nair.company.com. Great. So we are proved that our first record's there. So once we get through all of that, which would be the first record, and we get through that process, we jump through all of those hoops. Then what we do at the end of that is we add a value of 1 to I. So now it's looking through this whole thing, and now it's going to be like, oh, is the value of 1 less than the length of staged users, which is 9? And yes, it would be. So now it's going to do the same thing for Aisha Khan. here, and it's going to keep on going as long as there's the value is true. But when it gets to Ravi Patel, it's going to stop, and it's going to get down and say, hey, listen, when we get to 4, it's going to stop and break it. It's going to say this email message, which will say record or missing email, stop the line. And I'm going to prove that by running it. I see the problem now. I tried to run that and I was wonder what caused the problem, but it was extra brackets. That should work now. All right. Exactly what we expected, because we went through each of the first 5, and then we got to Ravi, was missing an email. So this kind of works forth as kind of a gate. See, it caught him and it halted, and that's what the break command does. One thing I want to be exact about, the gate stopped Ravi for Ravi's missing email. It did not stop for Maria. And Maria's email is a mess, because when we look up at Maria's email at the top here, we have an extra space there. Remember, we put that in episode 1. That's deliberate, but missing and messy are 2 different problems. Messy means it's there, but you can't trust it yet. And that's cleaning. And that's actually the next episode. Today, we just caught what was absent. Next time, we will scrub what's dirty. And notice that I am not checking for FTE and is active in this case, because false is a real answer and 0.0 is a real answer. So Tom being 0.0 and an active isn't broken, it's just Tom. Empty text is broken. A valid no isn't. And knowing the difference is actually key when evaluating data. This is one of the things that AI cannot, at least not in a great way yet, or we're improving pretty rapidly, but it can evaluate the data in a critical sense, in a constructive sense. You don't need to evaluate every piece of data within the context of the data set we have right now, because that's irrelevant to what we're trying to do here. And that's something AI struggles with, is that critical thinking. And that's why people like us who understand the business and understand what's important are so crucial in the intelligence age. And that's why it's important for us to translate our skills to understand how this works and make our lives easier, and to be able to move technology forward by having that critical theory thought, because that's the most important thing when it comes to operators and builders like us. And here's the thing where Python and Salesforce are actually part ways, and it's worth being honest about. In Python, I just said break. I literally posted break right here in these 3 conditional statements, and the loop just stopped. Like right here, we can see that it stopped. It didn't go through everything, and it exited out of the loop and it just went to the next block of code. And in a flow, it wouldn't let me do that. It runs the whole collection every time. There is no break element. If I wanted this in a flow, I'd have to filter out the bad records out at the get records email, get records, and put email is not null so that they never enter the loop, or set a flag and skip the rest. So it's the same goal, just different constructs to how that works. They don't map one-to-one, and I'd rather say that than pretend that they do. And right now, these are 2 separate passes. The router here with the for loop, and then the gate here. Wiring the gate first so nothing routes until the batch is clean. That's assembly, and it's coming. Today we built the parts. So I'll be straight about where the work actually was today, because it wasn't the syntax. The loops, the ifs else, the while, that went in clean, pretty much. I've written this logic for years. Today, I just wrote it with a keyboard instead of a mouse. The part that made me stop and think wasn't how do I write a loop? It was should this even be a loop? And it goes back to the flow. And we had the decision nodes there, right here. And I could have just used two get records, two get elements. And these aren't beginner questions. They're the same calls I make in a flow every week. What do I check? What do I trust? Where does this fall apart at 5,000 records? The syntax was new. The judgment wasn't, though. That's the whole reason I believe this transfers. And here's what I actually want you to leave with. You didn't watch me learn control flow today. You watch me rename it. Every record trigger flow you've built that loops a collection or routes on a checkbox, that's a for loop and an if statement. Every time you filtered the blank records up before processing, that's a validation gate. You've been writing loops and conditionals for years. You called them loop elements, decision elements, entry criteria. Python just took the canvas away and handed you the 4 lines that were underneath it the whole time. And if you want the reason this matters past Salesforce and even past Python, a loop with a conditional inside of it, like how we have with this while statement, is the exact shape of an automated AI agent. Receive an input, loop through the state, make a decision, fire an action, or break the process. That's the basic primitive the whole AI era is assembled on. You just wrote it and called it user routing. All right, just the final reflection for the day. When I started, I figured the day I hit loops and if statements would be the day this got genuinely hard. Turned out it was the opposite. It was the most at home I've felt yet because it was my own logic wearing different clothes. The engine can decide now. It walks the whole workforce, sorts everyone, and stops the line when a record's too broken to trust. But it still can't clean anything yet. Maria's email is sitting right there, space and all, waiting. So next time we stop catching bad data and start fixing it. We teach the engine to clean what it's handed before it trusts it. That's where this goes. So that's it for this episode. Take care, everybody.